All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started here. Um, just did the recording and just a couple things before we get started. For those of you um, that read the email that Hunter sent out on Wednesday, you'll seen in there that we have started posting some of the dates for the year that have been scheduled. So you can go on the website, volunteer website, and start signing up for those. We'll send another email probably early next week or maybe towards the end of this week. That's just specific to that email because I'm sure some of you are creatures of habit and probably just saw the normal Wednesday email and didn't read too far into it. But we do have some dates on there, so hopefully you saw that and can get on there and get signed up. A couple other things for those of you that are new. We will, when we do send another email, if you're not sure how to sign up, we'll send a help video on how to do that. It's a pretty straightforward process. And then the only other thing is on these, on the signups, just important to note that when you do sign up, you're not necessarily guaranteed a spot in there. How the process works is the captain will basically assign you a role once they determine how many people they need, and then we also give preference to local people, and sometimes we might need some experienced people that might get in as well. So but definitely encourage you to sign up, and then our captains will work on assigning people and making sure that we all know what our schedules are, at least 2 weeks in advance, and usually way earlier than that. All right. So today we're going to talk about transition zone. So just a kind of a warning, I guess, for those of you that are a little new, this concept is extremely difficult. So if you don't get it, not a big deal. It is challenging. And I think most of us, when we get our Form 1s, we pray that we don't get the TZ listed here on the approach shot. We have to deal with it. But typically you'll deal with this once, per 9 holes usually. And it just depends on what tee you're doing, but sometimes it happens more often than not. But this transition zone you'll see is kind of marked on your Form 1 with a TZ. We'll talk more about kind of what it is and why we have it in the system. But again, it is a complicated subject, so it's going to take some time to understand. And I think even for our experienced folks, getting an understanding of it can be challenging as well. So don't be discouraged if you don't quite get it right away. So why do we have this transition zone concept? So when we are doing and getting our yardages, we're assuming averages, right? We're assuming that on average, the golfer hits it using the female 210 for scratch and 150 for bogey off the tee, and then 190 and 130 for their second shots. And there's obviously those yardages for men as well, but we're assuming those are kind of averages. Sometimes we go a little short, sometimes we go a little long. And so this transition zone is kind of a built-in buffer that basically says on a 1-shot or 2-shot hole, we have basically 10 yards on a 1-shot hole, and on a 2 or more shot hole, 20 yards extra that the ball could go. And when we think about hitting into a green in that scenario, because we're looking at averages, sometimes it's going to go farther, sometimes it's going to go less. We basically have, when we're looking at our green target value, we're looking at sometimes we're going to have situations where we're not going to get to the green. And when we don't get to the green target value is very, very small. And then other times we're going to get to the green. And when we get to the green with a longer shot, the green target value is higher. So basically what this transition zone is doing for the green target is it's taking an average of those two scenarios and saying that on average, this is what's going to happen. So that's kind of why we have it in there. And again, it's all based on this concept that what we're hitting to are averages, not necessarily 100% strict numbers. We're not always hitting it 250 off the tee and 210 for the second shot for the bogey or the scratch male player. That's what we're assuming, but sometimes it goes farther, sometimes it goes less. Okay, and then also if anyone has any questions, feel free to write them in the chat too, or unmute yourself as always as well. So it's the transition zones, an area close to or on the green that is just beyond the average distance a scratch or bogey player can expect to hit with consistency. Again, on a one-shot hole, the transition zone is 10 yards deep, and on a two or more shot hole, it's 20 yards deep. So you'll see this table here will kind of show you what that transition zone is. The nice thing about our Form 1 is that that TZ will be calculated for you. If you do have scenarios where you might need to get into a transition zone because of a dog leg or a roll or another effective plane length adjustment, then you might need to do some math on your own. But most of the time, it's going to be given to you right on the sheet. So next on the thing here is when the rating team determines the center of the green, maybe you reach significantly more or less than half the time, the transition green target value may be adjusted up or down 1 point. We're not going to worry too much about that. For those of you that understand this concept, you can take that and use that. But basically what we want to do is when we see the transition zone, especially when we're getting used to it, you'll see in your chart and under green target, there's going to be this bottom row. So when you see TZ and you're in TZ, you're going to want to default to using this row for your green target. Okay, and basically what the plus or minus 1 point is saying, it's saying at the bottom is that, if we are going to get there more often than not, then we're going to want to increase the green target value because we're going to be hitting it with a long shot more often than a short shot. But again, I would not recommend that unless you're experienced and really understand this concept. Just stick with using the default value. I know in my time doing this, or when we started doing this in 2020, I think I've very rarely, maybe once or twice, used that plus or minus. So I just stick with the value at the bottom when I see that on my Form 1, and I just move that on down. Okay, but one thing we do need to look at is when we are determining how we're going to evaluate the transition zone. We need to determine if there's going to be anything that's going to get us out of the transition zone or anything that's going to impact our transition zone. So any kind of effective plane lengths, whether it's roll or dog leg or forced layup, may actually get us out of transition. So we might have one, but with a forced layup, we might not have that transition zone anymore. And so when we adjust our approach shot value on the Form 1, that TZ might not be applicable anymore. And so sometimes when you do see that, that you are going to run into scenarios where you can't get yourself out of transition. And sometimes it's convenient to do that, makes it easier to get the values. So that's something that you can do. Obviously they need to be there, but between roll, dog legs, and forced layups, you are going to have situations where even though TZ might be listed on your sheet, you're not necessarily going to always have that, because you might have something that will kick you out of transition. So once you've determined that you are in transition and that we determine our green target value. So again, 95% of the time, maybe even higher, we're just going to use this value at the bottom for our green target. Once we've determined that, then what we need to do is we need to determine if the player is going to reach the center of the green 50% or more of the time on a long shot. And then we're going to rate the hole using that approach shot information. So we'll go through an example here in a second, but this is what happens the majority of the time. Okay, so if you're ever unsure of what to do, this is what you should default to doing. But then there could be a situation where if the player is short of the center of the green more than 50% of the time, assign an area 10 yards short of the front edge of the green as the landing zone from where the approach shot should be played, and rate the hole using that area for the approach shot. And then you'll have an additional landing zone to the green as well. So a lot of times this might be used if you're at the tail end of the transition zone on a 2-shot hole or 2 or more. So again, it's 20 yards. If you're at the tail end of it, 17 of the 20, chances are you're towards the back, and you may not reach the center of the green more than 50% of the time. And if that's the case, then you're going to pick a spot 10 yards short of the front edge of the green and use that to evaluate your lateral and other things that come into play at that point. And when you see this example here coming up, I think it'll make a little bit more sense. The other things you'll kind of think about when you're determining this 50% of the green or more, or the center of the green 50% or more, are things like roll or features near the green that might kick the ball towards the hole. You might have uphill or downhill shot into the green. If something's downhill, chances are you're going to get a few extra yards on that shot coming in. And so you're probably more likely to get to the center of the green on a downhill versus an uphill shot from the same distance. So those are all things that you can look at when you're trying to determine if I'm going to be in this 50% or more or less than 50%. All right, so let's get into an example here. So this best just to kind of see this. So this picture here, let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. So this picture here is a hole. It says 380-yard hole for the bogey male golfer. So they're going to hit it 200 off the tee, and then their next shot in is 180. Okay, but we know that they hit it 170, but we have a 10-yard window a 20-yard window for a two-shot hole. So they're in that transition zone because it's between 170 and 190. So they're in transition. And now we need to determine if they're going to reach the green 50% of the time. So in this first example, we're going to assume that they do reach the green 50% of the time. So what we're going to do is the adjustment that really matters when we're doing this is our lateral adjustment. See if I can get it all in here. So what really matters is our lateral adjustment here, because we're going to look at when we look at our lateral adjustment, we need to know how far the shot is. So even though the golfer can only hit it 170 on the second shot, we're going to use the full value of 180 when we're looking at and getting the number. So if we say here it says 17 from the center of the green to the penalty area, we're going to use that to get our value for our lateral, which is going to turn out to be a 5. So it's important there that you're using the full 180-yard shot, even though in this case the golfer can only hit it 170. Okay, so this is what we would do if we're hitting at the center of the green's going to get hit at least 50% of the time. And again, this is the most common scenario when you're dealing with transition zones. And then the same, when we use that 180, we're going to look at the same thing in terms of any kind of other obstacles that come into play. Obviously, we're going to have any kind of carry or anything like that that would be involved with that as well. In this hole, we don't have that. But typically, it's going to be mostly when you're looking at the lateral obstacle when you're getting that yardage. So if we don't think we're going to get there 50% of the time, then we have a different way to evaluate lateral here. So in this case here, and we're also going to have a couple or an extra value for fairway in this case. So now we're going to say that we're not going to get there 50% of the time. So we pick a spot that's 10 yards short of the front of the green, which is where this area is right here, where the 14 width is. So that's 10 yards short of the front of the green. And then we have a lateral here. And for that lateral, it's 170-yard shot because we're saying we're hitting it 170. And then we also have another approach shot, 24 yards, which is basically 10 yards short. In this case here, the green depth was 28. So that gets us our 24 with a value of 17 for the lateral. So we're looking at two things laterally when we say we're not going to get there more than 50% of the time. And then we're also looking at 2 fairway values. So we're looking at our fairway value back in the fairway, but also the fairway value here 10 yards short as well. And so that's listed in this example. Oops, went too far. As a 22-yard wide fairway there. All right. So before we kind of move on and talk a little bit more about transition, is there any questions from that basic example there, or how it works when we either are 50% of the time or more or less than 50% of the time? Okay. So again, that's really the hardest part of this transition zone, is determining if we're going to get there 50% or less of the time. And the same thing works, obviously. The other example they have here is for the female bogey, and you have the same kind of window in terms of and same kind of evaluation. So when you are looking at this, it's important to keep in mind that if you do have any questions, talk to someone that's experienced that can talk you through this. The other thing that you'll want to keep in mind, and I didn't point this out in the example, but many times when you're not there, or when you're there less than to the center of the green less than 50% of the time, you're often going to see a 2 adjustment for bunkers, which often gets overlooked. Because in this case, our landing zone is the short one here is near this bunker, we're going to have not only the Y adjustment for fairway bunker here, but we have 2 fairway bunkers that are coming into play, even though this technically is a greenside bunker, because our landing zone is near this and we're not yet to the green. We're going to qualify that as another or second fairway adjustment as well. All right. So really quick on the Form 1 here, I'm just gonna just go through just a quick example. And this isn't, I mean, the example we went through was much more detailed in the book there, but here when you do see a TZ, okay, to get your value. So when you see this, you're gonna have, obviously you're gonna have your shot length. So we've got a male golfer here, 553 yards. First shot goes 200 for a bogey golfer, right? Because we're dealing with our bogey golfer here. So that's 353. Next shot goes 170, which leaves 183 for our remaining value. So our 183 value is really going to be the value that we use. So a lot of times it's not a bad idea to write that in here so you know what value you're going to be using for your lateral. We're just going to assume that we're going to get there 50% of the time. We have nothing in there saying that we won't. It's not uphill, or in fact, it's actually severely downhill. So we're probably going to get there. We're definitely going to get there 50% of the time. So we're going to go to our green target chart, and we're going to use the bottom row, and we have a effective green diameter of 22. So we go to the 22 and then to the 50-50 transition zone value, and that gets us a green target value of 5. Okay, so $22 is this one here, and then our 50-50 value is a 5. So that's how we get to that value. And then when we're looking at our lateral here, our lateral at the green is L32. So we're going to look at 183. We go to lateral. 183 for our bogey player is going to be at the bottom row. 32 is a 3. So our lateral here, and I know this is a little off, is going to be a 3, assuming that there's nothing else here that's greater than 3, which there very well could be. Okay, but It's important that we use this full shot value when we're evaluating our lateral. All right, any questions about transition zone? Hunter's got some good quiz questions on transition zone this week, so you'll definitely get some experience. But when you do it, I guess, again, just to reiterate, this is a complicated subject. It is one of the more difficult things to understand, at least from my perspective. And so if you don't get it right away, just be patient, take time. It'll sink in eventually. All right, doesn't look like there's any questions. All right, Hunter, I'm gonna transfer it over to you here. Hopefully this will work. Hunter's gonna cover the rest of the show here. Hunter, do you have the host controls now?
Yep, it looks like it all went through, so we're all good.
All right.
All right, so for the rest of this, let me share my screen so we can see what we're talking about here. So we're gonna real quickly go over green surface, which is the last piece of the obstacles that we still need to go over. So what you'll see here on this page is a copy of what your green surface table will look like in the book. So green surface, let me first say why we're going over this. So green surface, most of the work for evaluating green surface is done by the measuring team when they come out before the rating day. So when you go to over your Form 1, in that bottom row where you would input the data, a lot of times it'll have the contour ratio, it'll have, if there's a tier, whatnot, will already be recorded on your Form 1. So really, generally, your captain will only ask the person that's rating the base T for that particular gender to actually complete the numbers on the bottom, because green surface, it doesn't matter what what T you're going for, or that you're rating for, the same green surface numbers are going to carry on for every single one of those. For every single one of those T's, you're going to have the exact same numbers because the greens don't change based on what T you play. So that's the first thing. So there's a good chance that you may not get asked to actually fill in your green surface until 2-3 years down the road into your rating experience. But it's always a good thing to know about how green surface, how to do the green surface on your Form 1. But then also, when you go back, is just to understand the theoretical principles behind green surface, because that's going to affect you if you have to make a tiered adjustment under green target, if you have to make whatever other kind of adjustments that you may need to make. You may want to know some information about green surface, and this will just help answer some of the questions that you might have. So basically, let's minimize that so I can see. So basically, the first thing you'll notice is that green surface is basically the relationship of two different variables. The first one being the contour ratio of the green surface, which I'll get to in a minute, and then the green speed. So the green speed is generally either measured by the measuring team, but we also have to know that sometimes if we are measuring in April, maybe May for some places, or in October, the green speeds that we're getting when we're out there measuring aren't always the most accurate. So a lot of times we consult with the superintendent and the head pro to actually find, okay, what is the range that your greens are in during that mid-season time frame. Yes, absolutely. And just as John put in the chat, it is good practice to fill in the green surface information, just so that you again understand the concepts of the green surface. So basically we have the contour and the green speed. So the green speed will obviously be at the top right of your Form 1. and then you just find in the table. A couple things to note before we go into the contours is when you see this kind of in some of these boxes of it, you'll see 7 and then 8 in parentheses, just as if we go back to the numerator orientation, for those of you that were there, we know that the 7 applies to the scratch player and the 8 applies to the bogey player. So we know that whenever we see parentheses in this chart, that value is applying to the bogey player, and the value outside of the parentheses is applying to the scratch player. So what is green contour, basically? And I have a couple examples to kind of illustrate what that may look like. Now, pictures don't do it justice, and this is why we actually do the measuring or the measuring of the contour while we're out there doing measuring. But basically, what this first column on your Form 1, it's going to say 1:1 is the ratio. The second column, it's going to say 2:1 is the ratio. And the third column, it's going to say 3:1 is the ratio. So 1:1 means basically that we are less than 2:1. So for example, what we do when we measure is, I'm going to real briefly stop my share so you can see me potentially. And I have here with me a stimp meter. So this is how we measure green speed, and we measure the contours based off of using the stimp meter to get accurate readings. So you probably maybe have seen these if you've been watching the US Open and the greens get super flaky and they're out there testing the surfaces during the coverage. So this is a 1 yard long thing, and it applies at about a 30-degree angle. There's a slot here in which the ball sits, and then you just, you can't really see it because the screen's too tiny, but you just elevate the one side of the stimp up, and then eventually gravity will take over, the ball will go running down the ramp, and then it'll run out. So while we're at this point talking about the stimp meter, there's 2 different measurements the stimp meter does. So the first is the green speed, and if we're doing green speed, we try to find the flattest part that we can possibly find on a hole. Some places on some holes, we just can't run a stimp because we're not going to get an accurate reading because it's the entire green may be contoured. But we try to find as flat of a point during measuring. We try to find a couple different greens which we can run it, and we try to find a flat part. We run one direction, and then we put a T, and then we run the other direction. As long as the reading from both directions is within 18 inches, we can then average the runs in both directions, and then that is our actual green speed. But what's more practical to green surface, though, is going to be the green contour. So basically what we do is we run it downhill in certain portions of the green to try to find basically the slope of the green. Most of the time, on most courses, that slope is going to be from back to front. It's going to be going downhill. As you probably have obviously played a lot of courses, generally the backs of the greens are generally higher than the fronts of the greens. So what we'll generally do when I'm out there doing it, because I a lot of times do the stimp during measurings, is we start at one portion of the green, and we'll roll a stimp downhill down the green. We'll put a T in the ground on where we started and where we finished, and then we'll go down there. We'll roll a couple balls, average it out, and then we'll go to where the average point is at the bottom and do the same thing back uphill. And so the distance that the ball runs downhill and the distance that the ball runs uphill, that is your ratio. So downhill is the numerator part of your ratio, and the uphill is your denominator part of the ratio. So basically what you're doing is, once you simplify those ratios out, is you're trying to find how much the ball comes back uphill, the distance that it came downhill. So for example, a 1:1 green could mean that on the average of all of your runs across the course of the green, that maybe the ball, is a perfect 1:1. It runs 12 feet downhill and it runs 12 feet back uphill. That would be a 1:1. For us to qualify for a 2:1, we actually have to reach, let me go back to the screen share function here. We actually have to reach a 2:1 ratio, which means for it to be 2:1, let's say the ball goes downhill 10 feet. it would have to come uphill less than 5 feet for it to be 2 to 1. So we would actually have to hit that. If it went downhill 10 feet and came up 7 feet, we still have a 1 to 1. We have to actually hit that 2 to 1 number before we start using the 2 to 1 purpose. The same thing then is the case with a 3 to 1. So for example, if we roll it downhill and it goes 15 feet, but it comes uphill less than 5 feet, then we know we have a 3 to 1 green there. So basically what we're doing is we're taking the ratio of the downhill to the uphill, and we have to actually exceed that value for us to be in that category. So for 1 to 1, it just has to be anything less than 2 to 1. For 2 to 1, it just has to be between a 2 to 1 ratio and a true 3 to 1. And then for it to be 3 to 1, it just has to be greater than 3 to 1 on the ratio. So I know pictures don't do justice, but I just want to kind of show a couple examples of places that I've been rating that have some similar features. So this is a green at Crooked Creek, and I know because I was on the measuring crew here that this was a 1 to 1 green. This green is literally just about straight flat all the way across. So this is pretty much kind of an example of what a true 1 to 1 might look like. The next one is this one at Saginaw Country Club, the 18th green at Saginaw Country Club. Kind of has some rolls and swales in it. But if I remember right, this one was measured as a 2 to 1 when we were out there. But it was one that definitely, as you can tell, the difference between looking at a 1 to 1, a 2 to 1, and a 3 to 1 from the eye is not actually going to provide you inherently with an eye test, is not going to really tell you what it is. I've had many times that I've been out there and, you walk up to a green and I say, I've played here before. I can just look at it and I'm like, well, that's definitely a whatever ratio. And then you measure and you're like, I was completely wrong. So that's why when we do the measurings, we check every single green for green contour, because greens change over time since the last 10-year rating, perhaps. And greens also, you can't really ever just tell by the eye what it's really going to look like. But then also when we come to 3 to 1s, there's going to be a few times across the state where we're going to find ourselves with greens that are very unique in the sense that they are a way greater than 3 to 1 ratio. So even if a green is significantly more than 3 to 1, we still only can put 3 to 1. We can't do 4 to 1, 5 to 1, 6 to 1. That's not an option in the book. So for example, this is the 18th green at the Fields in Ithaca. And I was lucky that I could get a street view on it because it was hard to find pictures of some of these greens. But this green, when we measured it during the year, we started measuring at the top, and to try to get a ratio measurement, we could barely get the ball to stop going downhill until it got almost all the way down to the edge of the green. So even though in a true ratio, it rolled downhill like 36 feet and only uphill like 3. So we technically, by ratio purposes, it was a 12 to 1. We can only use 3 to 1 because 3 to 1 is the maximum that we can put on our form. So even if you come up to a green like this and you're like, whoa, that, when you're rating, you're like, there's no way this is 3 to 1. It's got to be way more. The reason it's 3 to 1 on your sheet is because that's the most we can do. So let's get back to green surface. So there's a couple other pieces that go with green surface that we'll talk about real briefly as well. The first is the adjustments. So there's the U adjustment. We really don't ever apply the first U adjustment, but the second U adjustment can definitely come into play. So the first one is unpleasant turf conditions. The second is if the circle concept has been applied to determine an effective green diameter, because a player cannot putt from one part of the green to another. So when we're out there measuring, sometimes we have some really wonky shaped greens that force us to use what's called circle concept, which is basically taking various different measurements of different sections of the green to find the green effective green diameter. One of those examples is Kyle pulled up. This is number 18 at the Moors in Portage. And as you can see, this green is basically a true U shape right here. So if the pin, let's say, was located, if the hole was cut somewhere down in this in this lower right portion of the green, if your player for some reason hit it on this side of this shaped green, you can't directly putt at the hole, or you can't, maybe even if you're back here, you might not have a chance to putt at the hole. So basically this U adjustment is in place for times when the player cannot putt from one part of the green to another. I know in my personal rating career, I have not experienced a U adjustment on green surface before, but it's definitely, just as this picture shows, it's definitely something that is a real possibility that you could run into from time to time. And when I think about it, a lot of times, when I think about why we would call this a U adjustment, a lot of times, as you can see, this green is kind of shaped like a U. So if you ever see something like this, you kind of apply a U adjustment if you would have to putt basically in a U shape to get the ball to the hole when the slope doesn't allow you to do so. So that's the U. And
Hunter,
then,
I have a question regarding this
Right.
U. Would it
Yeah.
point, and I'd like to even get maybe Mark's interpretation. Would it be advantageous to have the U adjustment when we have this second U adjustment pre-populated on the Form 1 like we do the tiers?
I would just from my opinion, I would prefer that it is, just because all of the other green surface stuff is already pre-populated. But I'm not sure if that's been a past thing that's been done or not. If one of the captains on the line can say if that's been something that's been done in the past.
It's a great question, and we since that U adjustment is been brought to our attention semi recently, probably within the last 8 or 10 years, I have been when we're setting up the Form 1s. What you'll see there at the bottom, if it's a tiered green, it'll say 2-to-1 T, which then is the indication for the tier. If it is a unpleasant or a U plus adjustment, we would put the specifics of the green 1-to-1, 2-to-1, 3-to-1, and add that U in there so that the person that is responsible for the green surface ratings will be able to pick that up. It is an adjustment for both players. It's not bogey only, it's for both players. And it is a green surface rating only. It does not apply to any other of the rating values that we apply.
Absolutely. So likely whenever the U would be applied for the circle concept with when a player cannot putt, it will be on your Form 1s generally. But it's always just as I always say, always when you see something on your Form 1, always when you're on that hole, be sure to look at what is listed on your Form 1, just to make sure that it is there, or maybe it may have been accidentally missed by the measuring crew. Always make sure that they are always checking that as well. But
Gotcha, Hunter. If I could add just one more thing. On page 41 of the guide, it shows diagrams of several different green types, and that U plus will be added when example D is in effect there, because you can see that L-shaped green carries that same inability to get a putt from one position to another on the green. And the effective green diameter then has been adjusted based on the circle concept. So there's several things that go into the determination of where that U is applied. And the captain must do it, and it's always done in advance of the actual rating crew getting there in the morning.
yeah, absolutely, Mark. That's definitely true. So we have a question in the chat real quick about the U, that the book talks about turf conditions for the U adjustment. So let me real quickly go into the U adjustment. The U adjustment being used for unpleasant turf conditions is something that is very rarely used. And there's basically two reasons why. So the first is that obviously there will be courses that we rate during the year that may have better or worse conditions as we go through it. But claiming that something is unpleasant, we may consider, you know, sometimes if a course has potentially less conditioned than others, we may in some cases think that things are unpleasant when they really maybe are not, and it could be, you know, something that the rating system wants to use the unpleasant for what I'm going to use with my second example, which is if a course has, let's say, a tree that is, for example, I'll use, I don't think we use it because the course had really good maintenance practices around it, but there's a course up in Houghton Lake where there's literally a tree in the center of the green where there's that. And so sometimes you'll see this also if there's trees, large trees overhanging the green, or trees that are immediately close to the green. There may be occasions where a large portion of the green maybe has roots underneath it, or the overhanging canopy of pine trees or willow trees or whatever prevents a large portion of the green from being in regular good condition, just as a matter of the factors around it. Because remember, we're looking at that such conditions must prevail through the mid-season. So really what you're looking for to apply this, and it would be extremely rare, would be if there was roots popping up through certain portions of the green, if there's, you know, large places where grass doesn't really want to grow simply because there's these giant overhanging trees that prevent light from getting there. Basically anything that is kind of understood by the golf course. And a lot of times before we would even consider applying that, the captain or the team leader on your 9 would ask the staff there, do you generally have problems with roots on the 5th green? Or do you generally have problems with this portion of the green potentially having trouble because it doesn't get any light, or whatever the case may be? And then they'll kind of clarify that to see if it's truly an unusual turf condition that's there, because we're not saying that the course is poorly conditioned when we use the U adjustment. We're saying that the course, there is an unusual factor that is causing the putt to potentially routinely miss the hole in a large portion of the green. And also when it comes to green surface, it's going to be even more rare to do it, because we also look at where holes are cut on the green when we're out there evaluating the green. And a lot of times if a course has a case, let's say where the tree is overhanging or there's roots in the green or whatever, there would be a very rare chance that you would be putting on the green across that, simply because the course is going to place the holes in the better portion of the green. And generally with the roots, the course and the architect and the superintendent will probably, you know, not include that as part of the green. They'll cut it as something else, or they'll change the shape of the green to accommodate that. So that U adjustment for unpleasant turf condition is an extremely rare thing, and generally the captain or your team leader will kind of show that as well. Yeah, so as John said, the captain will generally explain that as if we get to a situation where we're kind of on the edge about that. So the last piece of this is a thing that only applies to the bogey rating, which is if the green is tiered. So I want to take a little bit of time on tiers for a minute, just to explain what is a tier and what are we looking for when we're out there measuring, but also where does the T adjustment get applied. So what you'll notice if you go to the master sheet of adjustments, which is doesn't even have a page number. It would basically be page 47 of your guide. It's literally on your back cover. There's this master list of adjustments here. And if you go down to the T adjustment tiered, what you'll see is there's an X under target and a B under surface. So basically what that means is when the tiered adjustment is applied, the T plus under green surface is only going to be applied to the bogey rating. The T adjustment under target is going to be applied to both players under green target. So this is why it's always important, as I've kind of stressed in some of the quiz videos and etc., is that when something is on your sheet, so if you go all the way down to the bottom and it says, 1-to-1 T or 2-to-1 T, you also have to remember that not only are you going to apply that T adjustment under green surface, you are also going to apply that T adjustment under green target to both players as well. So then we're going to go into, what is a tier per se. So real quickly, let me, I don't have thing here. So basically what we look for with a T adjustment is going to be times in which there are basically two different shelves on the green, and there's two different criteria that it has to meet for that to be the case. The first is that if we drop a ball on the ridge of that tier, the ball basically can't stay on the tier. The second qualification for that tier is that we have to have an elevation change of 2 feet between the different tiers. So this is another case where sometimes you'll walk up to a green as a measuring crew, and you'll walk up there and you'll be like, well, we need to check this for a tier. It definitely looks like a tier. You'll check the ball thing and the ball won't stay, but then you'll go down and you'll look and you'll be like, okay, you'll get out sometimes the bunker stake that we use for bunkers, and you'll just use that or a tape measure or whatever. And you'll be like, okay, that either does qualify because it's greater than 2 feet in elevation change, or it does not qualify because it's not greater than 2 feet in elevation change. So there's another piece that comes onto this tier, and I don't want to get too complicated, but I feel like this is an important piece to add as well. A tiered situation is when, if you are on that tier and the ball hits the ridge of that tier, the ball is going to stay on the green. So there's basically two distinct shelves that occur. There's another scenario that we run into as a measuring team with false fronts, which is if we drop a ball on the front of the green, it'll actually roll all the way off the green. So that scenario, if you imagine a hole, and some of you have probably played them, where you'll come up to where the fairway comes up to the green, and then the green will start, and then there will be this big ridge in front of the green, and then it'll shelf off into the actual putting surface where the holes will be located. Even though that slope is on the green, that's going to be a false front that's going to be taken into account by the measuring team when they measure what is the green front, what is the calculation of the green itself. All of that information is going to be taken care of by the measuring team. So even though that slope may be more than 2 feet, the ball may not stop on it. When you're out there as a rating crew, the measuring team has already taken that into account, and that is not a tier per se in the sense of rating. So with that being said, we are just about 10 minutes early on our finishing time for today. So
Hunter, can I just add one thing to follow up on the tiered situation? When a green is considered to be tiered, the minimum contouring or the minimum ratio has to be 2-to-1. So when lots of raters walk up to a green, they see a change in elevation or a ramp, and they'll look at their sheet and they'll see that it's 2-to-1 without a T application. It could be that the measuring crew has determined that the green is relatively flat. It has that one feature of a tier, which doesn't meet the complete definition of a tier, and they may choose to consider that moderately contoured. So there are generally a bit of averaging that goes into something like that. There's a strict definition about how to apply a tier, which we adhere to. So there will be, and there are situations where the measuring crew would deem something to be moderately contoured as opposed to actually flipping a T plus on that application.
Absolutely. Definitely agree with Mark. And I think Mark also brought up another big piece is when we're evaluating green contour at the green, when we're measuring, we do a whole lot of averaging. It's something that's very common. And so basically what that means is let's say, for example, we have a large green on a golf course. Okay. And part of the green is sloped at, half of the green is sloped at 1-to-1. So there's like this side that's sloped at 1-to-1. And this other side of the green is sloped at, let's say, close to 3-to-1. Let's just say it's 3-to-1 to make math easy. So even though this part's 1-to-1 and this part's 3-to-1, each half is, the measuring crew in that case is likely just going to put it as 2-to-1 because this part of the green is, at that 1-to-1. This part of the green is at 3-to-1. So we're just going to average it to be 2-to-1. And the measuring crews have generally been around for so much time doing this, and at least some of the people that are on the measuring crew, that they will consider all of those factors and be able to much more quickly do the math of, what is 1-to-1, what is 2-to-1, what is 3-to-1, so that they can truly find an average and find, which portion of that scale is going to be used on the Form 1. John, do you have something to add?
As Mark was saying, it's well worth reading page 3, the tier, because there are criteria that have to be met. And one of the things that's a dead giveaway is the 2 distinct plateaus. I find a lot of raters that see a sloped green, and I'll use the 3-to-1 up in Ithaca, they think that's tiered. No, it's sloped at a 3-to-1. It doesn't have 2 distinct plateaus. So go ahead and read number 3, page 3, tier, and I think that'll help the raters ascertain why the measuring crew has decided what they've decided. Thank you.
Absolutely. Alrighty, so we are about 7 minutes left in our session, and we don't really have anything else to cover for today. So if there's not any other questions, I'll stick around here for a few minutes if there are any questions, but everyone is free to go on and enjoy their day. And we'll see you. Also, the quiz has already been posted on the volunteer page. If you're looking to do that before the email comes out on Monday, that's already there. Same thing with the video to go along with it. And we'll have our next session on the 17th at 10 o'clock.
Hunter, I had just thrown in a quick question just to clarify, because I'm new to this. It's the measuring crew that actually determines whether the green is tiered, correct?
Yeah. The measuring crew will be able to identify and will actually do all the testing for the tee. So if it is tiered, it'll show up on your Form 1 as tiered. If it's not tiered, then there won't be a tee on the Form 1.
So as we walk up there, as you said, you take a look at it, you have this feeling in your head, but if it's not been measured as a tiered green, it's not a tiered green.
Yeah, because the measuring team has taken into account the image that's in your mind. They have considered that and taken all of that information to account to come up with whatever value rating they're gonna rate the green at.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I understood that. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Hunter, this is Tom. I apologize for not making last week's meeting.
You're good.
And I haven't seen the video yet. Was there any update on that U adjustments for fairways as the codes, the narrowness of it and when that applies?
I don't believe I can check with Kyle to see if he's gotten anything back.
Okay.
With guidance on that. I haven't heard anything yet. But I will make a note to make sure that we have that information by next week. So
okay, well, yeah, I'd be interested in hearing Mark's evaluation of that. Mark, I was questioning the final 2 U adjustments in the manual when they relate to a narrow landing zone, and I was always under the impression that meant less than 20 yards. But is that interpreted too strictly? Is 24 considered narrow where we might make a W minus or -2 adjustment?
There, excuse me, there are rules that apply to that, and they have changed. Formerly, those applications were made there. They changed the chart. I believe it was in the 2016 revision where the less than 20-yard width was adjusted to a greater value. You can see on a for women, a 270-yard hole to a 309-yard hole, that value now is 6, and for the 20 to 24 yard wide value is 5, and there's the tweener value of 4 that's skipped between when we see the regular averages of 25 to 29. So they added extra value in there to take away the opportunity to begin to add any of those U adjustments as we used to do. So when applying a width adjustment, a W plus, W minus, you have to go by the strict application of what it says there in terms of a ball landing and bouncing and not being able to use that part of the fairway with a +1. +2, the fairway tilt is so great that it will bounce the ball into the rough. So that's the W +2. When it collects, there's the minus application. So you have to strictly apply those where the ball is going to be affected by the contours of the green, not simply a flat width. They've already done that on the tables in that, as I say, I believe it was a 2016 manual adjustment.
Okay, well, that adds some clarity. I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Hunter, this is Tim Connors.
Hey, what's up?
Oh man, I'm feeling like I'm just getting beat up by your quizzes. I'm just terribly disappointed in myself. The quizzes are great. Is it possible for us to go back and retake them?
Yeah.
So I can go back and start all over with these without the notes, you know, whatever, and just test myself again?
Yeah. You can definitely go back. It should let you put in the exact same email as well.
Okay, that's what I didn't know.
It shouldn't flag it for being a duplicate at all.
I mean, I have a second email I can use. So I just was curious on that.
Yeah, I mean, definitely go back and see how much you've gained from it, and then if you need anything else, just always reach out. So.
Oh, I haven't been bashful yet. So.
So Tim and Hunter and all the rest of y'all who are what we affectionately call rookies, who haven't been out on the golf course yet and haven't, really taken a look at a golf course from a rating perspective. We in Michigan have one of the top 2 or 3 in the country training applications that we go through. We love our volunteers. We love our rookies. Studying the guide, reading the book is the first step in the application. Light bulbs really begin to go on once you've been on an on-course orientation. We will be offering you at least 1 or 2 of those before you even have any responsibility of working with another rater on a golf course. So I hear in your voice some discouragement. What I want to do this morning for you, Tim, and others is to indicate that is absolutely normal. And we can't fix normal,
right?
But the orientations that are going to begin to be listed and scheduled will be illuminating. Let me just put it that way, and you'll enjoy them. We're going to offer them throughout the state. There'll be a couple of events in the metro area. We've got a couple for the southwest area. There'll be one in Lansing. We'll have more in the north, and please attend those. And we go into just about everything you've been studying with the winter Zoom contacts. but you'll actually get your laser out and you'll be doing the measuring. You'll look at mounds, you'll look at bunkers, you'll step off how we encircle greens and the reasoning why we do all of this stuff. We take about an hour per hole, and it will illuminate to you exactly what it is that you're going to be looking at when you go out there and rate. So
That's
I
what
encourage. Yep.
I'm just hoping that actually being on the course will help some of this just connect a little bit more than it is in the abstract.
I guarantee
it really will. It will all come together. Everything that you've been reading and looking at, once you get out in the course and we go through it all, it really is like a light bulb going off. It's like, oh, this just makes so much sense. And so, yeah, like Mark said, don't worry if you're not getting all the little details and that right now. It will come together, and it will make sense once you're out there with us. So
thank you. That really helps a lot to hear that from you guys.
we've all been through it. Let me guarantee you that.
and nobody's going to just grasp every little detail right away. I mean, it just doesn't happen. I mean, you kind of, I think you grasp the major points like in one phase, and then you start getting into the intricacies of more of the points as you go along. And you're not expected to know everything when you go out there. You're going to, once you go to your orientation, like I said, so much will come together for you. And then when you go out, you're going to be working with someone who's going to be explaining things to you and that. So it comes together, I think, in phases. So don't worry if you don't know every little thing, because you're not expected to.
Good, thanks. Hunter just posted something about the on-course training starting in April and May. And I looked at the schedule, and the ones I'm in Mount Pleasant. So the ones that are closest to me, like the Country Club of Lansing starts in April, for instance. Would it be better, do you think, to wait to sign up for a team until